Welcome to a tour and tutorial of the CINAHL database, accessible through the Shoreline College Library. CINAHL, which stands for Accumulated Index in Nursing and Allied Health Literature, is one of the key resources that Shoreline students have for their research in health sciences, with an emphasis on nursing in particular. We're starting here on the Shoreline Community College Library homepage, where we can search for many different types of resources and help. But we're going to start by going to the database icon, because as an index or collection of scientific literature, CINAHL is a database that contains journals and articles, among other things. A couple different ways that we can find databases. We can search alphabetically, find CINAHL there. I also sometimes recommend using the subject menu if you're not sure exactly what database you're looking for. So we can go down and select for, say, nursing, and also get the featured databases for nursing and find CINAHL there. CINAHL includes several specialized search functions and features that make navigating its allied health research content even more efficient, especially for nurses. We're going to start with a keyword search. So in these boxes here, we're going to be thinking about what term best describes your topic, and usually a good search will end up involving some trial and error to make our search more specific or use different vocabulary. We'll also take a look at how subject headings and CINAHL headings can help us align our search terms to best match the language that researchers are using in their scholarly conversations around your topic. So the most effective keyword searches will usually ask about the relationship or intersection between keywords. For example, if your topic is, say, asthma, that's very general. And you can see we might even get some autocomplete from CINAHL to help us out, try to make it more specific. But an effective search will consider how what we already know about asthma might relate to or overlap with other aspects, even if it's just specifying like a demographic or treatment. I find nurses are already really good at keywords because having to do PICO questions also asks you to think about the relationship between things like the problem, population, intervention, comparison, and outcomes. And a lot of those categories can translate to effective keywords. If our problem is really general, like asthma, maybe we want to add in something like an intervention to make our search more specific and complete. So I'm going to steroid, and I'm going to let it use another term so that I'm not excluding articles that refer to it as corticosteroids instead of steroids. And in research, getting too few results can be a problem, but it can sometimes be worse to get too many. So we're also going to look at all the filters and limiters down here that can help narrow down to more relevant results. We're often not just searching for specific content, like in our keywords, but we're also searching for specific format of our results. I recommend almost always selecting for full text to avoid getting abstracts for articles that may be behind paywalls, and selecting for peer-reviewed so that we're getting credible resources. And you may also have assignments that ask you to narrow down further, like, for example, using just original research instead of, say, a literature review or a meta-analysis. And you can also even select for things like articles written by nurses. We almost always also want to limit for publication dates because information and discovery in health sciences evolve so quickly. So we usually want the most current information possible. For our search, we're going to start with 5 years. Okay, and now we're going to see what results we get. There's lots of other, you can see we've done 4 of many, many filters. You can certainly go back and think about selecting for demographic or even the type of study. But with our search just here, we have 243 results, which isn't too bad. And we can also now curate our results even further by using the articles we've just found. Selecting just our first article result, You can see it was published just last year. It's open access and peer-reviewed, all of which is great. And we can get a lot of information and make use of certain tools before we even begin reading this article. Many database interfaces will include a tool menu, like the one over here. That's going to allow us to see some download options. We can save this article as a PDF and read it later. We can store it online in one of our drives or email it to ourselves or someone else. If we click on these quotation marks, we can auto-generate a citation in our desired format, APA 7th edition. And now we have a generated citation. I always recommend double checking any auto-generated citation or any auto-generated content, but this is a way to help keep your citations organized. And as we kind of scroll down, we can see metadata like these major subject headings, the abstract in both English and French, and we can find the very important DOI number. That's the Digital Object Identifier, which we can use kind of as a stable, permanent location for this article that can be shared and used in citations and is a more reliable access point to your article than just its regular URL. You might also notice that there's no article here, and that's because sometimes we need to do the additional step of going offline to the original platform by selecting this Access Now tab. And now we're going to have access to the full text in the context of its original publication. We have it in HTML, we have it as PDF, and we have additional tools that we can use to sort of navigate through the article, like this menu, where I can skip, say, right to the conclusion. I can also check out the section of related research. I can skip right to the references for this article, particularly if it's a study that I think is a useful starting point. It could be really valuable to kind of follow the other research that was involved. And it's also sometimes useful to just be able to identify the way that these publications actually work. They can get kind of decontextualized in databases, but just understanding what journal it was published in, how many authors there were, and kind of the publication and scholarly publication culture that's involved in creating all of this information. Back on CINAHL, I want to point out the major subjects that we saw before. These subject headings tagged for this article, you can kind of consider these actually to be sort of additional keyword or search term options. So for example, if I want to follow up the subject asthma drug therapy, which is related to our initial search, and get additional results that can give me a way to understand kind of other interventions, how I can search and compare those to my initial intervention of steroids, and just kind of participate in a larger conversation around this particular topic. I can also go back to our initial search page, and I can find it in my recent activity that's saved with this little clock icon. And the same way that we used filters to kind of identify what kinds of documents we wanted, we can also search for content a little bit differently by looking at these CINAHL headings. And if I use our original sort of really general term, I can see that this database has designed a lot of different ways to help organize, direct, narrow down, and expand our search, and allow us to find new overlaps and connections. So if I want to add CINAHL headings as a layer to my search, we can select for additional ways that asthma treatment, research, everything has been tagged to essentially help control the vocabulary we use when we search these topics. And if we just go with generally with asthma, just as an example, looking through these categories, there's so many different dimensions that we could add. going to select for symptoms, add that to our search protocol. We can see it here now in our original search, asthma and SS for symptoms. Let's see, we only have 6 results, but potentially if I'm really trying to find information about symptoms and how they're controlled by different therapies, maybe these are exactly the kind of specific starting points that I need. So like any database, CINAHL will generate the best results when you're willing to experiment or explore, rather than just searching linearly. Be curious, embrace trial and error, and if you have questions, please reach out to your Shoreline librarians.